This is terrific, you know? I mean, meeting you guys, a bunch of other believers out here in the middle of nowhere. Now, what's the chance of that? Is that God's will or what?
Glory!
Link said. Said Junior Deadhead. Fergie winked and did a little bantamweight shuffle. Link and Junior were leading him down a narrow passage through the ruined building. All Fergie wanted to do was get far enough away from the big spook himself and that lunatic with the muck and machete for an arm, get his bearings straight, lose these freakos, and get the hell out of town.
So, Fergie said, we're going where? Out for some air or what? I mean, a quick tour is fine with me. I don't have to be back or anything.
God is good. Glory to his name.
Fergie looked at Link. Fella, you gotta get to a doc sometime. They could fix up that little problem you got with the nose. I mean, you know, no offense. Like, the leather work's very attractive and all, but, Link looked confused.
Can nobody fix nothing except Pa? Pa's reordinated, and Pa says if I will walk in God's misery and pain, I can get the holy galleon when I'm 15. Mean Machine will get it next year, and I'm after that.
Fergie's throat went dry. All the meals he'd missed stirred a queasy soup in his belly. You're not saying that like what I think you're saying.
Pa's got it all,
Link said.
The whole blessed mutilation of God. Ears and eyes and nose sewed up, and his mouth too. He's the only angel got that. So he has sewed up every wicked orifice against the evil world. He's shut out sin and cast Satan aside. He's become a pure abomination of the Lord.
Look, I got some private hygiene stuff, and you fellas have plenty to do, so if you can just point me outside... Link kicked Fergie, who bit a mouthful of floor. Link straddled Fergie's back. Junior wound a piece of rusty wire around his hand, then looped the other end around his feet. They dragged Fergie on his belly down the hall.
Wait a minute,
Fergie said.
I'm a believer. I'm a maggot of God, just like you.
That's why we love you, brother,
Link said. They flipped him over on his back. Fergie looked straight at a bed of hot coals. He looked at the heavy iron spit, and the thing that was crackling there, crackling red and black, juices hissing down into the fire. Fergie threw up.
Them unbelievers,
Link said.
Just don't taste right, you know? It's impure flesh is what it is.
Fergie closed his eyes.
This is a gag, right? I want you to tell me that this is a gag.
Junior kicked Fergie in the mouth. He grabbed his hair and pulled him closer to the fire. He drooled on Fergie's head. Link found a knife somewhere in his rags, reached out and sliced off something from the spit.
No, the unbeliever's flesh is unclean, Lord, but a person's gotta eat.
I was lying,
Fergie yelled.
I don't believe in anything. I mean, I don't even believe enough to be an unbeliever. So what do you think of that? I mean, that is something you don't want to mess with, man. I also got this skin condition. I got athlete's foot, guys.
Glory,
Link said. Junior Deadhead said.
Pa says the Lord's sure been good. Says it's a sign dropping you from the sky into his hands,
said Mean Machine. Why don't you tell Pa to get the mush out of his mouth, Dredd said. You think God understands that crap? Even if he's listening, he's sure as hell not listening to Daddy Dust Bunny over there. Mean Machine's knife arm swept out in a wicked arc. Dredd felt something like the breath of Arctic air across his chest. He forced himself not to look down. He knew he would see a line of red, a cut no deeper than Mean Machine wanted it to be. He did what he liked with that thing, and he did it with surgical skill.
You bringing wrath and retribution down onto yourself, Dredd. The Lord is fearsome in his gaze,
Mean Machine said.
He will smite you down and grind you under his heels. Your flesh will tremble with terror of his ways.
You ever been in a rumble in Red Quad, pal? You don't know shit about the terror of his ways.
Enough!
The Reverend Billy Joe Angel raised one filthy hand above his head, then lowered it slowly until it stabbed at Dredd.
Finish him, son. Finish him now.
Mean Machine glowed.
I'll finish him, Pa. I surely will. Three, boy. You can go up to 3. 3? I can go up to... You mean it, Pa? Oh, glory, I'm gonna do a 3.
Mean Machine tapped the top of his mechanical head. His mouth fell open, his eyes turned to glass. His whole body shook. His arms and his legs jerked straight out like a droid in happy oil. The copper squares on his face turned blue and red. He squealed, lowered his head, and came straight at Dredd. His head hit Dredd in the gut. Dredd gasped for air. The pain nearly took him. The cords around his wrists had snapped tight, tearing at the muscles in his shoulder and his chest. Dredd knew he couldn't take it again. The freako would break something vital and he'd bleed to death inside. He made himself smile through the pain. That's it? That's the whole bit? And this is what you do? Mean Machine was dumb, but he wasn't as dense as Dredd had hoped. He knew the damage he'd done. He knew what would happen when he came at Dredd again.
That was my practice run,
Mean Machine said.
I got you sighted and good now.
Quit talking and do it then, Dredd said. You're starting to piss me off.
The computer room gave Hershey the creeps. Ohlmeyer took a seat at the computer station and pulled up an extra chair. I appreciate what you're doing, Hershey said. I want you to know that, Cadet. The screen blinked. Picture of Dredd as a baby swam into view. Dredd and his parents, the same picture Hershey had found in his locker. Hershey watched, stunned, as the elements of the picture began to fade and disappear. Ohlmeyer spread his hands. That's it. Sky, foreground, house, parents. All a fake, Judge. Every line of it. Everything except the baby. Baby's real. Rest of it is zero. Zilch. It doesn't exist.
Quit talking and do it, Dredd said. You're starting to piss me off.
Mean Machine threw back his head and laughed.
He's just a spoofing, Pa. He's hurt bad. Real bad. I heard stuff crunkle inside.
The Reverend Billy Joel Angel raised his wooden shaft.
Bring him to Gauze, boy. Bring him to Gauze. I'll do it, Pa. I will. I'll bring him to God real good.
His yellow eyes flashed.
Is this a number 4, do you think, Pa? You think maybe it is? 4.
Pa bellowed.
4,
shouted Mean Machine.
4.
Mean Machine reached up to his shiny silver head and dialed himself a 4. His mouth fell open. Blue fire crackled in his eyes. A low sound started in his gut, trembled up his body and out his throat in a raged roar. He swept in a dizzy circle around the fire, twisting and turning and shaking himself in a frenzy and a froth. Then, with a howl, he lowered his head and came straight for Dredd.
Glory! Glory! Glory!
Dredd knew exactly how this maniac's charge had to end. He would hit him with the impact of a truck, and all of Dredd's organs would spurt out of his ears. He tensed the muscles in his belly and his thighs. Everything hurt. Dredd opened his mouth and roared, lifted his body at the waist, snapped his legs straight out. His boots met the top of Mean Machine's head. Mean Machine's speed kept him going for a second and a half. He stopped, then shook all over, and staggered off in a ragged, dizzy course. His head found the wall. He turned on his heels and stumbled off toward Dredd again. The deadly blade whirred above his head. Smoke came out of Mean Machine's nose. Dredd jerked his body aside, felt the blade hum by, wrapped his legs around the metal head. Dredd closed his eyes against the pain and lifted Mean Machine off the ground. The pole holding Dredd's hand snapped. He fell in a heap, came to his feet, and ripped the leather thongs from his wrists. Mean Machine came at Dredd again. Dredd lifted half the broken pole, swung it in an arc at Mean Machine's head. Mean Machine went down, shook himself, and came to his feet again.
"Okay," Dredd said. "I get the message, friend. You can take it in the head. Forget about the head."
Mean Machine jerked up straight, scanned the room, and settled on Dredd.
Don't like you anymore. Like you real good, but don't like you no more at all.
"We got a problem then," Dredd said. "You don't like me, and I'm still fond of you." He whirled the broken pole above his head. Mean Machine came at him. Dredd let go. The pole struck Mean Machine solidly at the knees. Mean Machine yelled and went down. His eyes rolled back in his head. Dredd moved in to finish him off. The earth exploded at his feet. Dirt and stones geysered into the air. Dredd threw himself to the ground, rolled, and came up on his knees. The Reverend Billy Joe Angel had an antique automatic weapon in his hand. He was screaming out a hymn and blasting every corner of the room. Dredd tried not to move. A blind man with a weapon like that was a hazard to everybody's health. Mean Machine suddenly came to life. Pa Angel centered on the sound. Lead stitched a nasty fence around Mean Machine.
Shit, Pa, it's me. It ain't him. He's over that way.
Dredd picked up half a brick, tossed it across the room. Pa Angel turned in a blur and blasted the brick to bits. Dredd went low and scurried along the wall into the narrow hall. He stepped out of the corridor and into the small room. Across the room, something that used to be a prisoner or a guard sizzled on a spit. A few feet away, one of Pa Angel's loonies was basting Fergie's naked backside with half a broom. The other hummed a hymn. Fergie's hands and feet were bound to the spit. He squawked and rolled his eyes. Dredd walked up behind Link Link, picked him up by the collar, and tossed him against the wall. Link Link's head made a terrible sound. Junior Head Dead turned and stared. He drew a long-barreled pistol from his belt. His reaction time was 6 months slower than Dredd's. Dredd took the weapon from his hand, turned it around, pulled the trigger, and shot Junior in the head. Dredd stood watch while Fergie got into his clothes. Someone roared down the hall. Pa Angel or Mean Machine, Dredd couldn't tell.
"Come on," he said. "I don't want to stand around here."
Fergie looked at him. "What are you going that way for? Man, I'm headed the other way. I'm not going back there."
"I'm not through in there," Dredd said. "Shut up and stay behind me. Pick up a brick. When no appropriate weapons are available, utilize those materials at hand."
"Judges, how to cover your ass, right?"
"Dredd, survival against all odds. I wrote the course."
"I had to ask."
"Normal behavior for lawbreaker scum. Ask a lot of questions, never listen to anything anyone says."
"Did you write that too?"
"No," Dredd said. "You did. You've been living it all your life, you and all your kind. That's why there's us."
"Us?"
"Us. Judges. As long as there are people who think the world is their lunch, there has to be someone to show them they're wrong. Now button it up and stay close."
At the end of the hallway, Dredd waved Fergie to a halt. The dying fire caught a dim point of light. Metal. Mean Machine's head. He was still laid out where Dredd had left him. The Reverend Billy Joe Angel was sitting on the ground by his son. Dredd touched Fergie's arm, signaled him to stay where he was. Fergie nodded. Doing anything else had never crossed his mind. Dredd took a cautious step into the room, kept his eye on the shadow across the room. Junior's long-barreled weapon was at his side. He took another step, come up behind the shadow, take the old man out, make sure Metal Dome was dead, look for any more weapons, and he heard the rush of air, had a quarter of a second to duck, curse himself, and remember Chapter 9 of his own damn book.
When you think the area's secure, chances are it's not.
Then Pa Angel's staff hit him squarely on the side of the head, and he went down like a rock. Dredd felt the ground coming up. Plenty of time to think. Hour and a half. Time works different somehow. Wham, drop, fall on your face, stationary target, get the hell up, he clobbers you again and you're flat-ass dead. Dredd pushed the darkness aside, just enough to wake up motor control for a tiny little nudge to the right. Not bad. Good. He hit the dirt hard. Pie Angel's staff came down again. Missed. Pie Angel kicked him in the knee. Dredd howled and rolled away. He thought about Herman Ferguson. What was he doing that was more important than this? Your own damn fault, Dredd. Count on a criminal type and you deserve whatever you get. He saw the scarecrow loom up above him, the weapon raised up behind his shoulders, ready for the kill. He watched the dirty hood fall away, saw the scarred and razored flesh, saw the leathered thongs tangled in strange configuration, lacing the horror's ruined face, covering the darkness where ears and nose and mouth and eyes and madness used to be. The Reverend Billy Joe Angel bellowed out his rage and swept his weapon down, and Dredd knew he didn't have time, that this was the one where he wouldn't walk away, the one where a blind man had fooled him with a stick and a pile of smelly rags when he wasn't really there. Something exploded in the rag man's belly and scattered him in several bloody parts. Dredd pulled himself up, stared at the judge hunters dropping from the ceiling, blasting through the wall, following the drill the way they'd been trained to, fast and quick and clean. 1, 2, 3, maybe more outside, but only 3 in here. Dredd threw himself at half a wall as gunfire stitched a pattern at his feet. A visored figure came right at him, firing his weapon. Dredd pulled Junior Head-Dead's revolver from his belt, squeezed the trigger, and fired. The hunter paused a fraction of a second, thrown off his guard. Dredd came in low. The gun clattered to the ground. Dredd raised up, jerked the hunter's helmet off his head, and slammed it across the man's jaw. He heard the sound behind him. Knew there were 2. Picked up the lawgiver, fired it in a circle an inch above the ground. The first man went down. Dredd swung his weapon by the barrel and smashed the hunter's face. He glanced at the hunter he'd shot in the foot. The man cursed him and started up again. Dredd kicked him soundly in the head. Fergie walked out of the corridor, clutching half a brick in his hand. "You're not going to finish him off? Why the hell not?" Dredd looked at him. "Because I'm innocent. Remember?" Fergie shrugged. "Yeah, I remember. So? You think those goons give a damn about that?" "Thanks for jumping in," Dredd said. "I appreciate the help." "Hey, I was ready, you know. You were terrific, man. I said to myself, Fergie, you can hop in the ring and finish these guys, but if you do, you're going to knock Dredd's timing off. You're going to... Shit, Dredd." Dredd swung around in a blur. The hunter was up on his knees, finger on the trigger of his weapon. His head exploded in a shower of red. Dredd stared at the man in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the stars. The Remington hanging from his hand, the long duster coat. Ex-Chief Justice Fargo showed him a weary grin. "Welcome to Cursed Earth, Joseph. Hell of a place we've created here. I guess hell's the right word for it, all right. Those columns, that piece of carving up there. This is the courtroom, Joseph, or used to be. That part of a face up there. That's the blind lady, Justice. Before your time. Mostly before mine, too. She treated everyone the same. No favors, no secrets. A jury of ordinary people. Hard to believe, that one, but it's true. They decided, not us. We should never have taken the law out of their hands." Dredd shook his head. "You had to. You brought order out of chaos." He saw Dredd's confusion. "To be a judge, to decide the fate of thousands of lives during your career, I think that's too much power in one man's hands. Too much, Joseph. For me, for you, for any man." Dredd read the doubt in the old man's eyes, the sorrow and regret. "I once tried to compensate for that," he said. "To strike some kind of balance, to eliminate the mistakes we might make, to put justice beyond the possibility of error. We tried to create the perfect judge. We called it Janus. Dredd frowned. I don't understand, sir. I've never heard that name before. Fargo shook his head. No, you haven't. It was 40 years ago, Joseph. To create the perfect judge, DNA samples were taken from all members of the council. Samples were analyzed and studied. One was chosen for the Janus Project. Mine. It was then refined again and again, altered to enhance the best qualities and screen out the worst. Weaknesses, frailties, any physical or mental characteristics that might obstruct the purpose of the project. We created you, Joseph. Dredd's breath caught in his throat. Me? Sir, that couldn't be. I had real parents. I wasn't made by any project. Yes, you were, Joseph. No. Joseph. Dredd gripped Fargo's arms. My parents were killed when I was just a kid. They told me at the academy. You told me. It was a lie. But I have a picture of my parents. You have a fake. A lie. Fargo shook him off. We lied to both of you. Both of who? Fargo wouldn't look at him. There was another person created in that experiment. But something went wrong, terribly wrong. Dredd blinked in sudden understanding. I have a brother? Yes. And what went wrong with him? Is he dead? Did he die? No. He didn't die. You were best friends at the academy. Inseparable. Both of you star pupils. Then he turned. Went bad. We didn't know it until then. We'd created one perfect judge and another who genetically mutated into the perfect criminal. Fargo stopped. And for his crimes, you judged him. Dredd came to his feet, fists clenched at his side. Rico? You let me judge my own brother, and you never told me? I couldn't, Joseph. You were like a son to me. A son? Dredd's hand swept out and grabbed the water jar from Fargo, shattered it against the wall. Rico had to be killed, Fargo said. To protect you, to protect the city. To protect yourself, you mean? Yes, that's true. God help me, I cannot deny that. I did it for myself. For all of us, for... Wait. It struck him then, like a physical blow. Rico. He's not dead. He stared at Fargo. Rico's still alive. Fargo looked at his hands. No, he's not dead, Joseph. He's alive. I signed the order myself. He's in Aspen Prison, special quarters there. I just couldn't destroy him, whatever he was. He's part of me, part of you. Dredd struck his fist against the wall. Damn it. Don't you see it? He gripped Fargo's shoulders. I didn't kill Hammond. He did. It was his DNA that convicted me. Our DNA. It was Rico. I don't know where the hell he is right now, but he's not in Aspen Prison. All the color drained from Fargo's face. He looked up at Dredd. Griffin! It has to be. There's no one else. He's deceived us both, sent us both to hell, and brought Rico back. The Janus Project? Yes, of course. Fargo's eyes went cold. He's going to do it. He's going to activate the project. Open up that box of horrors again. Dredd shook his head. No, he won't. Griffin can't do anything without Rico. We get to Rico, and we stop Griffin cold. There are ways to get into Mega City. We both know that. It's not that easy. You don't know, Joseph. I know I can sit on my butt in this pest hole and die. Dredd's voice clattered off the walls. I know I will not do that, sir. He took my badge away from me. That's all I ever had, and I will get it back. Fargo slowly pulled himself to his feet. Mean Machine screamed, a high-pitched, senseless babble of sound, a hymn of joy and death. Fargo sucked in a single breath. Mean Machine's blade arm ripped through Fargo's back, lifting him clean off the ground. This is Duncan Harrow with the news. According to our sources, a squad of 7 Lawmaster-mounted judges arrived on the scene at the Mega City Bank. Minutes later, 4 more street judges reported in at the site. The judges entered the bank in what is reported as a standard intervention wedge. Only seconds later, an explosion ripped through the building, sending flaming debris into the street. Now, early reports indicate that all 11 of the judges are casualties, as well as an undetermined number of bank employees and citizens. Duncan Harrow here with a special bulletin. Only moments ago, tragedy struck again in Mega City. At 2 minutes after 1 this afternoon, an explosive device of undetermined strength detonated in the street judge locker room deep inside the Hall of Justice itself. Though no official will comment at this time, there is little doubt that this tragedy and the earlier massacre of judges and civilians at the Mega City Bank are most certainly connected. This is Duncan Harrow. Good night for now. This is Tommy Waco with the news. This part of the story has not been on the news. Another person lost his life in that chaotic event in the Black Quad. A colleague, a friend, and a fine journalist. Duncan Harrow died in that same alley tonight. Duncan's car was found parked several blocks from the alley in question, but Duncan's remains, along with his blackened video camera, were found several feet within the alley itself near the scene of the disaster. It was like Duncan Harrow to put himself in harm's way in order to bring you the news. That's the kind of man, the kind of reporter Duncan Harrow was. A man very much like another journalist we sorely miss, Vardis Hammond. Now, maybe it's no longer safe for a journalist to speak to you in this manner, but here it is. Vardis Hammond felt that much of the lawlessness in Mega City could be laid at the feet of those very persons responsible for upholding the law. I'm speaking of the High Council of Judges itself. This is Tommy Waco with the news. Back to you, Katie Clough, for an on-the-scene report from the site of the tragic Black Quad massacre. Craning his neck, looking nearly straight up, Fergie could see the broad stripe of gold, the dying sun's reflection on the great Mega City wall. In a moment, the stripe disappeared at the top of the wall, half a mile high. Now, as the darkness began to gather in, he could clearly see the glare of flame low on the wall, not 20 yards ahead. A brief puff of smoke appeared and vanished in the air. It's a vent from one of the city's incinerators, Dredd explained. There's a burst twice a minute. That means we got 30-second intervals to get through the tube before it flames again.
That means you're out of your mucking mind,
Fergie said. Come on, get up. Let's go.
No way, man.
What's wrong?
What's wrong?
Fergie stared.
Are you kidding? You're gonna get me killed. Oh, God. Look at that.
A fireball roared out of the vent, a tongue of flame 30 feet long. Fergie felt the heat on his face, smelled the charred remains of 1,000,000 garbage cans. Dredd waited until the flames died down, then walked up to the edge of the vent, keeping close to the wall. Do what you want, he said. I'm going in. I got things to do. There's a maniac loose in Mega City.
And there's another one loose out here, Fergie said. Great time I'm having. I'm out of Aspen, I got a new life ahead, right?
Wrong.
I'm crashing in a shuttle. Cannibals think I'm catch of the day. Now I got fireballs up my ass. I owe it all to you. Thanks so much, Dredd.
Dredd looked at him. Me? You're blaming me?
Of course I'm blaming you. If you hadn't arrested me on false charges, I wouldn't be here in the first place. No, I'm staying right here, Dredd. Someone arrests me? Fine.
All right.
Until you apologize.
Dredd looked at him. The law doesn't apologize, Ferguson. Do I have to remind you of that?
So? You're not a judge anymore. I gotta remind you of that?
Dredd looked tired. Ferguson, what difference does it make? What if I was sorry, which I'm not? This is going to change your life or what? Fergie brought himself to his feet. He looked at the dark horizon. He didn't look at Dredd.
I'll bet you've never said those words in your life. Not ever. You owe that to me, Dredd.
Dredd cocked his head and looked at Fergie as if he'd just dropped in from Mars. I'm supposed to say exactly what?
I'm sorry. That's it. That'll do fine.
I'll review your case, Ferguson.
Review? Review is good. I'll accept that. That's a start. It's a... Hey, Dredd!
Dredd picked Fergie up by the waist and tossed him into the chute. Go, Ferguson. 30 seconds. Run!
No!
Fergie turned and started back. Dredd was right behind him. He stiff-armed Fergie in the back and sent him sprawling down the chute.
28, 27, 26,
Fergie said. Stop counting, Droog. Dredd shouted. Move!
22, 21, 20... Where was I? Dredd, I'm gonna fry.
Right. I'll make sure you don't. Dredd racked a shell into the chamber of Fargo's gun. Fergie looked over his shoulder, saw the weapon pointed at his head.
Okay, I'm running. 15, 14...
Fergie heard a low rumble, then a tremor he could feel through his boots. A thunder so deep it shook the walls. Something flickered far ahead, something bright and red. The sight nearly stopped his heart. The fireball coming right at him. God, he couldn't be that slow. He still had time.
Damn you, Dredd. You were wrong.
Maybe it wasn't 30 seconds, Dredd said behind him. Maybe it was something else.
Oh, shit!
Dredd suddenly stopped. He reached out and grabbed Fergie's collar and jerked him to a halt. Fergie stared. Dredd shoved him against the wall. He braced himself and fired the Remington at the floor of the chute. He pumped the weapon again and again. Fergie felt blood in his ears. Through a veil of dirty smoke, he saw the twisted grate at Dredd's feet. Dredd kicked it with his boot. Kicked it again. The grate gave way with the clatter and vanished in the dark. Dredd's gesture was perfectly clear. Fergie jumped into the dark hole. Half a second later, he saw the fireball roar overhead, felt the awful heat, smelled the hair burning on his head. Fergie flailed his arms in the air. He hit something soft, plowed through it, didn't stop. Struck bottom on his knees, came up hacking and spitting black ash. Felt Dredd's boots hit his back and went down again. A dim light from somewhere to the right. Dredd rose from the dark, his face black with soot.
You admitted you got it wrong,
Fergie said. I did what?
You said maybe it wasn't 30 seconds. You said it was maybe something else.
So what?
So it wasn't 30. It was maybe 13?
It wasn't 13.
You don't know that. It may have been, 12.
Shut up, Dredd said. He ran down the alleyway behind 2023rd Street, Fergie close behind. There were screams from the street, the sound of breaking glass. A looter with dragons tattooed on his face raced by with a holo set. Now and then he saw judges. Some of them were holding back the crowds. Some of them were dead. He used all the courage at his command to keep from jumping in to help, to fight beside his friends. He knew he couldn't do it, that he had to stop Rico if he could. Besides, he was a fugitive now. Even men who knew him might kill him if they could. That hurt. That hurt a lot. Almost as much as watching the people of the city tear his world apart. Getting into the Hall of Justice wasn't hard. Every veteran judge knew how. The judge in the locker room turned, startled. Dredd hit him carefully, a point below his neck. The man sagged. Dredd eased him to the ground and began stripping off his uniform. It wouldn't quite fit, but that was fine.
Oh, hell, why not?
Fergie rolled his eyes.
What else can they do to me? I'm dead already. They catch me and they can't kill me twice.
Don't count on it, Dredd said. The lighting is subdued in the council chamber. The somber atmosphere reflects the mood of the justices themselves. They know this is not a time for secrets or evasions or half-truths in council politics. This is a time of reckoning, of honest exchange, of sharing the strength, the wisdom, and the craft that brought them where they are. This is the time when they will perish or survive. Judge Esposito.
This is the latest casualty report. 96 judges have been assassinated. Now, I'm sure that's a conservative figure. Our lines of communication are severely disabled. Property loss, civilian deaths. We can't keep up with that.
Judge Magruder.
Whoever's behind all this is familiar with our every procedure. They have our security measures. They even know our scrambler frequencies. Nothing is safe. They know everything we do.
Judge Esposito.
With only a handful of judges on the street, riots are breaking out all over Mega City. We don't even have emergency personnel anymore. We don't have anyone to send. The situation is critical.
Judge Silver. It's more than critical. It's a disaster.
We cannot replace these judges, even if we put the cadets on the street, which is an action I cannot bring myself to think about. We would not be at full strength for years.
Judge Magruder.
We don't have years, my friend. I doubt very much we have days. And mark my words, with nothing to control them, they'll be up here at our door next. You can bet on that.
Chief Justice Griffin.
There is a solution, you know. It's there. And perhaps this is exactly what it was designed for. Project Janus.
Judge Magruder.
Chief Justice Griffin, the mere mention of that name, that abomination, is intolerable and grounds for impeachment.
Judge Silver. No, it's unthinkable, sir. Out of the question. This council tried to play God once before. It almost destroyed us then. Chief Justice Griffin.
And if this wholesale slaughter of judges continues, then what, Judge Silver? We shall surely be destroyed if that occurs. What possible purpose would that serve? If we bring Janus into play, it can...
Judge Esposito.
It can what? A new batch of test tube babies won't solve this crisis, Chief Justice. We do not need reliable judges 20 years from now. If we're going to survive, if this city is going to survive, we need help this minute, today.
Judge Silver. I quite agree. And with all due respect, Chief Justice, we have a desperate emergency here, a problem of the moment.
This is not the time to speak of measures whose ends none of us will be here to see. If indeed we dare to consider such an action.
Chief Justice Griffin.
But I am not speaking of procedures that would take years, Judge. I would hope you'd give me more credit than that. No, you are all right. All of you. We cannot wait. And in truth, we don't have to. Science has come a long way since we initiated the Janus Project. Accelerated growth incubators are far more technologically advanced than they were at the time. We could create adult subjects now, fully grown and trained at birth. We could replace the judges we've lost in a week.
The holo blinked into life before the council table, a perfect sphere, a small blue world turning slowly in the inner space of the council chamber.
Central?
Griffin said.
Utilizing current technology, give me a time factor on the ability of the Janus Project to produce a fully grown adult subject. Priority reply.
At once, a solid field of zeros and ones began crawling across the sphere.
Given the current status of genetic engineering, an adult subject could be incubated and completed in 8.22 standard hours. My God!
Judge Esposito sat straight up.
Stop this, Chief Justice. Stop it now.
Griffin didn't look at him.
I believe you agreed to consider the project along with the others. I withdraw that agreement. I don't believe procedure allows for that.
Esposito glared.
I don't give a damn what procedure says.
He jerked his head toward Griffin.
What he's doing is criminal. You're fools, both of you, if you let him continue with this.
Carl, Magruder leaned in and laid her hand on his arm.
Carl, it's a presentation. We agreed to that. It doesn't have to go any further.
Esposito started to speak. Griffin glanced at him, then turned to the shining sphere.
In what quantity, Central? Give me a projected number of incubated and completed subjects.
Laboratory number 1 of the Janus project is currently equipped with 100 subjects. Under fully operational conditions, 700 subjects could be completed in 7 days.
Judge Silver stared at Griffin in disbelief.
That many? If this is true, we could replace our losses in 1 day. Exactly, Griffin said. We could regain adequate control of the city almost at once and clean out the riotous elements in every sector. Why, before the week is out, we could reinforce trouble spots at such a strength that these unruly dissidents would think twice about showing their faces in the streets again.
These unruly dissidents you're talking about are people, human beings, Chief Justice. Esposito watched the blur of data flashing across the sphere. People, not numbers. Magruder shook her head. He's right. We shouldn't even be considering this. It's inhuman. The whole concept was inhuman from the beginning. It is madness, sir. It is not the council's job to play God.
Judge.
Griffin spread his hands and smiled.
Madam, we sit in judgment of our fellow citizens because we must, because order is necessary for the continuation of a peaceable society. If there was no need for such supervision, we could disband and go frolic in the park.
Don't you patronize me, Chief Justice. Magruder came to her feet. She glared at Griffin and jabbed her arm at the shimmering globe.
Central, restore the security blocks on the Janus project at once.
Griffin smiled.
I'm afraid you can't simply vote all by yourself, Judge. We are a council here. We act together.
He looked at the others.
I find it most painful that I have to handle this myself without your help and support. I am deeply hurt that none of you have the will or the strength that these dangerous times require. Central,
Griffin spoke without looking up.
Janus will remain unlocked. My command only. Authority, override Megacity Emergency 195.
Esposito came to his feet.
This is treason, sir. You have gone too far. You have sealed your fate here, Chief Justice. No, Griffin said. I'm afraid that you have sealed yours. Rico, in here.
He spoke without moving his eyes from Esposito. Rico walked into the great room. He wore the full-dress combat black of the judges. He held the lawgiver straight down at his side. He looked at the council and smiled. Magruder's face was drawn, frightened.
Damn you, Griffin. Damn you to hell for this. That kind of talk is not constructive, Judge, Griffin said. Send him away. Stop this horror at once. Judge,
Griffin let out a breath.
I have to ask you to...
Magruder's left hand dipped beneath the table. Rico seemed to make little effort at all. Magruder's head slammed into the massive slab at her back, spattering the marble red. Silver cried out once. Esposito didn't move. His eyes were on Griffin as he died. Rico smiled, studying his weapon as if he'd never seen it at all.
Who said politics is boring? I might run for office sometime.
A pall of acrid smoke hung over the room. Griffin sniffed the air and turned away from the carnage.
I want you out of here now. I don't want anyone to see you near this place. Go out the way you came. Ilsa will be there.
Ilsa's getting on my nerves.
Get out of here, Rico. Do it now.
Rico shrugged and disappeared behind the marble slab. Griffin walked quickly toward the doorway to the hall. The big wooden doorway exploded and slammed to the ground. Griffin stepped back. Dredd stalked into the room, the shotgun smoking in his hand. He looked at Griffin, then past him at the horror of the council table. He raised his eyes slowly, aimed the Remington squarely at Griffin's head. "You murdering bastard, you." Dredd stopped, shook his head. "Rico, he did this. You wouldn't have the stomach for it, would you? Where is he? Where is he, Griffin?"
Don't be foolish,
Griffin said.
Rico is dead. He's been dead for years.
"Talk to me. Where is he?"
Dredd, listen to me, all right?
Griffin raised his hands and backed away.
Things are going to change, whether you like it or not. Nothing's going to stop this. Not you, not anyone.
"Janice, is that what you're talking about?" Dredd turned his thumb straight down. "I won't let it happen. I will stop you any way I can."
There's nothing you can do. Not now. Nothing that...
A shout echoed through the corridor. Heavy boots pounded the granite floor. Dredd jerked around and faced Griffin. Griffin smiled, grabbed his belly, doubled up, and writhed on the floor.
In here!
He yelled.
Hurry, for God's sake!
Dredd stared at the man, then suddenly understood. He cursed Griffin under his breath and ran, dodging into the small anteroom off the council chamber. Half a second later, judge hunters swarmed into the room, lawgivers at the ready.
Get him!
Griffin pointed shakily from the floor.
Damn it! Go! He murdered the whole council!
The hunter squad turned and charged out of the room. An officer bent down over Griffin. Griffin recognized the face. "We'll take care of you, sir. I got medics on the way."
Rick, Captain, never mind that. Get Dredd. Kill him!
The officer hurried away. Griffin waited until the footsteps echoed down the hall. He then stood and walked to the black table. He looked into Magruder's dead eyes. He touched her with his finger, then drew a red smear across his chest. Word would get out that he was wounded, that he wouldn't even let the hunters stop to give him medical care. He smiled at that thought. He could picture them, at dinner, in their barracks. It was pleasant to imagine the things they might say.
There is nothing to keep us from going to fully operational status,
Griffin said.
There is no longer any council, and the city is in chaos. There is only one authority left that any government personnel will listen to. Me.
Rico raised a brow. "What you didn't do was kill Dredd when you had the chance. That was not a good decision, Mr. Chief Justice."
He'll keep the street judges occupied while we work on Janice,
Griffin said.
It's not a problem, my friend.
I do hope not. I don't like problems. I like things to flow. Isn't that so, Ilsa? Rico likes things to flow. Ilsa laughed. Griffin thought her features had an almost alien beauty. It seemed inconceivable that such perfection stood so close to Rico's giant robot, that relic of forgotten wars. Yet she was a cold perfection, much like the silver monster itself. Maybe they belonged together, along with Rico, who was perfection of a sort himself.
I'll be back,
Griffin said.
You don't need me for routine initiation. Central, prepare the Janus facility for full operations. My command.
Janus operational. One more thing. Rico stepped into his path. I believed you promised.
What?
Griffin paused.
Oh, yes, of course. Central, appoint Judge Rico to the Council of Judges. Appointment to take effect at once.
Central replied. Unable to comply.
Why not?
Legal difficulties.
Judge Rico is listed as officially executed 9 years. Well, your listing is obviously in error. Central does not make errors. Correction of record, Central. Authority is Chief Justice Griffin. Central is not mistaken. You were given incorrect data. Judge Rico is alive. Please correct and carry out my command. Data corrected. Judge Rico is alive. Judge Rico is approved as a council member as of this date. Entered. Thank you, Rico bowed. I accept, and I will carry out my duties to the best of my ability. Griffin turned on his heels and stalked across the room. Ilsa walked up beside Rico. He could hear the soft fabric of her dress against her legs. She laid a hand gently on his arm. You shouldn't anger him like that. Ilsa walked up beside Rico. He could hear the soft fabric of her dress against her legs. She laid a hand gently on his arm. You shouldn't anger him like that. I like to. You don't have to, Rico. She tried to pull away. His fingers pressed into the soft flesh of her arm. You don't want to say things like that, Ilsa. Griffin thinks I'm insensitive. He's wrong. I have feelings. Don't I, Fido? The big robot made a rumbling noise. You and I should not be in conflict, Ilsa. No, we should not. Well, then we won't be, will we? Rico smiled. We will work as a close, smoothly running team. He turned and walked to the computer bank, gazed at the 1,000 blinking eyes. Status of the Janus Project, Central. The DNA samples have been removed from frozen state. Operation is online. I am prepared to begin the cloning procedure upon command. Put that on hold, Central. Slight change of plans. I wish to purge the DNA samples you have on hand. Ilsa stepped forward. What are you doing, Rico? What is this? Rico didn't answer. Proceed, Central. DNA samples purged. Central, activate the DNA sampling console. Sampling console activated and ready. Ilsa clenched her fist at her side. The robot warrior whirred, swiveled its head an inch to the right. My God, it knows. It can sense my emotions, heartbeat, something. She watched as Rico walked to the dark metal wall. A panel opened with no sound at all. A white ceramic shelf appeared. Rico ripped his sleeve away and placed his bare arm on the hollow. A shiny tube whined out of the wall, split itself into 8 gleaming needles, clawed for an instant in the air, then plunged its silver fingers into Rico's arm. Narrow columns of red began to climb the spidery points. The red disappeared. The needles rose quickly and sucked themselves into the wall. Rico smiled at the 8 crimson droplets on his arm. DNA samples have been obtained. Analysis and replication proceeding. Rico laughed. Griffin is a plumber, a file clerk. All he's doing is exploiting my genius, my intelligence and abilities. And yours, Ilsa. We're the giants here. Griffin is the dwarf. Don't you see that? Ilsa closed her eyes. My God. It was a mistake to keep you alive. He should have never done it this way. Rico poked a finger between her breasts, hard enough to make her gasp. He touched her lips. Ilsa held her breath, stunned by the power, the force, the raw heat that seemed to draw them together. When he finally drew her to him, his presence overwhelmed her, took her in a rush. He bared his arm again, showed her the red spots of his blood where the silver spider had drunk its fill. He didn't have to ask her, to tell her. She knew what to do. what she ached to do, though she had never known this need before. "You are an extraordinary woman, Ilsa. This is a moment only you and I could share. No one else, because there are no others like us in the world." She brought his arm to her face, let the droplets brush her cheek, brought her lips to each small well of red. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, yes, yes." He stood in the narrow hallway, clutching the Remington. "Stay behind me," he told Fergie. "I don't want you in the way." "Hey, no problem," Fergie said. "Won't even know I'm here." The room was totally wrecked. Hershey's computer had been dashed against the wall. Dark scars on the wall said someone had picked up the machine and tossed it half a dozen times. He left the living area and moved quickly down the hall. More broken glass. Blue shreds of paper that looked familiar to Dredd. He picked up a piece, held it to the light. Came from a judge training manual. Civil Disorder 201. "This is not what we ought to be doing, Dredd. This is where the hunters are going to expect you to be. Let's get low, man. Old Fergie will take you downtown where I know how to survive." "Sewer rats." Pardon me? "You want me to hide with sewer rats? The lawbreakers? The scum?" "Oh, excuse me." Fergie raised his hands. "I mean, just because every judge hunter in Mega City wants your ass nailed up on the wall doesn't mean I shouldn't show proper respect at all times." Dredd stepped into the bedroom. The boot hit him hard in the chest. Hershey held the lawgiver steady in both hands, the muzzle aimed between his eyes. "Both of you. Up against the wall. Spread 'em wide." "Hershey, I thought they'd..." "Thought they'd what? Killed me?" "You thought so, or hoped, Dredd." "Hold on a minute. Stop it. What happened here?" "I'm a judge. Someone wants to kill me. Someone almost did. They get you in the street, in your home, anywhere." She gave Dredd a chilling look. "Why don't you tell me what's happening? They are dying out there. 108 judges in 48 hours. What the hell is going on?" Dredd shook his head. "You think I'm part of this?" I don't know who or what you are anymore. I don't know anything." "I would never hurt you, Hershey." Hershey backed off across the room. She reached in her jacket and tossed a Viewey to Dredd. "Tell me about this. Make me believe in you again, the way I did when I defended you. I couldn't imagine you doing anything that was against the law, and then I found this." Dredd took the Viewey without looking at it. "The man beside me in this picture is my brother. His name is Rico. He was the best judge on the street, the smartest, most dedicated. And suddenly something happened to him, to his mind. He went insane, Hershey. He said the judges should rule, not serve. He said that was our destiny in life, our place in history. He finally became more dangerous than any of the criminals he'd put away. A lot of men died trying to stop him. I had to judge him." "That was the one," Hershey said. "Yeah, that was the one." "And you're telling me he's doing all this? All this killing?" "Not by himself. He's working for Griffin." "Griffin?" Hershey slowly lowered her weapon. "Oh my God. It fits, doesn't it? We've got to let the council know. They've got to stop him before he..." "It's too late for that. There isn't any council. Rico murdered them all an hour ago. Griffin set it up. Griffin was there." Hershey sat down. "All I could think about was the tribunal. I should have known when I found out you'd been drugged. I thought it was Fargo, that he didn't want you to try to stop him from taking the long walk for you. You didn't even know that, did you? What they'd done. Oh, Dredd." "It's all right," he told her. "You didn't have any way to know what that son of a bitch was doing. No one did." "That's why the DNA convicted you. You and Rico are the same. Brothers. Did Fargo know? Was he?
He was part of it. They all knew. Everyone on the council. It's not exactly like Rico and I are like real brothers. We're the same. Clones. We're inhuman. Defective. He just broke down first.
Oh no, Dredd. You are not the same.
You said it, Hershey. Remember? That I had no feelings, no emotions? Well, now you know why. I'm not programmed to feel. Just like Rico.
They didn't do that to you, she said. You did that to yourself. You hurt because you had to condemn your brother. You told yourself you would never let that happen to you again. You would never take care for anyone, never let anyone close. He felt confused, mixed up inside. It was like she was talking about someone else, someone like him. Fergie poked his head in the door. The computer's back up to the idiot stage, and that's the best I can do for it right now. I got enough of it working to go in and look around. I tried to find this Janus business, but there's nothing. Nowhere.
Hershey looked puzzled.
Janus?
That's the code word for the project that brought Rico and me to life. I'm not surprised Ferguson can't find it. It would be buried under so many security barriers. Dredd stopped. If Griffin's got Janus back online now, it's going to be using a lot of power.
Fergie shook his head. I tried that. No new energy allocations for anything that big, even under an alias. Of course, that moron machine I patched together, I wouldn't trust it to count apples. No, they wouldn't risk putting something like that on the net, would they? Hershey said. But it's still got to use power, so they'd have to steal it, wouldn't they? From everything they could get their hands on. Check the sectors for recent blackouts, any sudden power surges. Can you do that?
Fergie looked pained.
I can handle anything you dream up, Judge. But this mortally wounded machine of yours, I don't know. I can try.
Wait a minute. Hershey bit her lip. The day of that fracas in Red Quad, I had to write up everything that happened because those Groons blew up my Lawmaster. I called up all the data in that area within the time parameters, temperature, bioair samples, even pollen count, for God's sake. I remember there was a significant power surge about 30 blocks wide. A big one. It didn't mean a thing to me at the time. Fergie whistled under his breath. Something like that shut down the power grid in the whole sector. We ought to be able to pin down a lot more than you get on the first-level data report. What do you mean? Dredd said.
Well, it doesn't just burn up everything in your body it touches. It leaves a trail. Nerve endings all crudted up, stuff like that. If you didn't know where the trouble started, you could pick up the trail about anywhere and trace it right back to the point of origin.
Fergie tapped the keys, frowned, and looked at the screen.
Let's hope this thing's still got the brain cells to... Yes! All right. Well, that's your basic power record for the date in question. Everywhere close to the Red Quad. Those little peaks are minor overloads. Now this one, the Big Daddy, is the power surge you're talking about, Judge. That's coming up now. Okay, couple of seconds. Okay, we're home. Block war day.
Fergie nodded at the screen. Intricate capillaries of energy webbed the sector, merging at one central point, a glowing amber ball. That's underground, Dredd said. No big surprise.
Way underground, Fergie added. Nothing goes that deep, man. Nothing I ever heard of.
Wait. What's that? That thing right there.
Oh, that's after image, Fergie said. I could clean it up if everything was working right. No, you couldn't, Hershey said. It's there, where it's supposed to be. You see that profile? That's the Liberty Lady. And what's left of her. The city relocated it, 75 years ago?
Fergie slapped a fist into his palm.
I've seen her. They built one of those death traps across from Heavenly Haven. Built it right around that lady of yours, swallowed it up again.
Hershey looked at Dredd.
They built the Janus project directly beneath it. Underneath the Liberty Lady.
Yeah,
Dredd said.
Where else? Griffin could almost feel the energy, the awesome surge of raw power that throbbed beneath his feet. That much power. It was frightening to imagine.
New life, the pulse of creation itself. Ilsa and Rico turned as he entered. The big robot stood silently behind Rico.
Dredd got away from the hunters,
Griffin told them.
Took some good men with him, too. Bastard's got 9 lives.
Not to worry, Rico said. Little brother won't get in our way. Rico made a note on a comm board and passed it to Ilsa. He's gonna be seriously outnumbered quite soon. Current figures, please, Central.
Current figures, Council Judge Rico. The new DNA sample has been multiplexed as ordered. Gametes are dividing.
New? Griffin turned on Rico.
New samples? What the hell's going on here, Rico? I didn't order any new samples.
No, but I did. That DNA in there was 30 years old. Sooner or later you have to clean out the fridge. Ilsa laughed. Griffin watched as she leaned in against him, watched her slide her hand down the length of his arm. He knew at once, knew what had happened between them. It had all gone wrong. It was Rico who had seduced the woman, not the other way around, not the way he'd planned.
You dare do something like that? That sample was created with the greatest of care for the...
Griffin stopped.
What did you replace it with, Rico?
Ilsa buried her laughter in Rico's sleeve.
Oh, my God. No, you didn't.
Please. Rico looked hurt. You should be congratulating me, Chief Justice. I'm going to be a father.
You don't know what you are doing,
Griffin told him.
The sample has to be pure of defects, or the accelerator will form mutations. That's what's happened before.
Rico laughed aloud. That's why Dredd's so ugly.
No.
Griffin stepped into his path, his fist clenched at his side.
It's you. For God's sake, Rico, you were defective. Your copies will be even more defective.
Rico's eyes blazed. You're lying, Griffin. All you are is about control. Your control. But the Janus judges won't be the puppets you want. They'll be my brothers. Who do you think they're going to listen to? You or me? Griffin closed his eyes a moment.
Ilsa, you're with him on this? You can't be. You know better. You know what he is.
I don't think you understand the full potential of this opportunity, honey. She let her fingers rest on Rico's chest. This project needs vision, not politics.
No, this cannot happen.
Griffin shook his head.
It can't.
I'm afraid there's not much you can do about it, Chief Justice. Griffin whipped a small pistol from his tunic.
No, not again, he said. No more like you.
The robot's arm came out of nowhere, wrapped a flexible steel tendril around Griffin's arm. The weapon clattered to the floor.
Get it off of me, Rico. Get it off.
The robot lifted him off the floor.
Rico, for God's sake, please.
Rico shook his head. You never understood me, did you, Griffin? I'm alive. I'm real. I'm not something you made to carry out the trash.
Central, override.
Griffin strained against the robot's grip.
Help me.
Request is denied, Chief Justice. The ABC War Robot is not linked to my main processor. You need to keep up with the times, Rico said. You look away for just a tiny second. Technology passes you by. He watched the man dangling helplessly above, looked at his eyes, at the terror in his face. He felt a sense of completion, a great sense of peace. Fido. Here, boy. Yeah, tear off Chief Justice Griffin's arms and legs, please. And save the head for last. They left the lawmasters behind a wall half a block away. Dredd wasn't sure what kind of sensors Griffin might have above ground, but he saw no reason to take any chances now. He held a scanner in his hand, watching the line of green static dance across the tiny screen.
"Dead ahead," Hershey said. "Right?"
"Down there." Dredd thumbed shells into the Remington.
"Well, looks like you guys have got everything under control," Fergie said. "Now I'll watch the lawmasters. Nobody's going to get past me."
"I might need you down there," Dredd said, "to help shut down the Janus system."
"You know, I knew you were going to say that. I knew it."
Dredd looked up. He could see the broken profile of the Liberty Lady's face embedded on the ancient brick wall. One sad and empty eye, part of a cheek, a piece of a heavy brow. Higher in the wall, the suggestion of a hand, a rusted torch. Dredd looked away, studied the scanner, and led his group inside. The building had been closed for repairs many years ago, then forgotten. Dredd walked through the empty hallways. A concrete stairway led to a cellar below. Ahead was a concrete wall. "The scanner says the source of the power surge is straight ahead." He nodded at the solid wall. "Right there."
"My lawgiver might blast through it," Hershey said, "but I doubt it."
Fergie let out a breath.
"People, just move aside, will you?"
He shook his head at Dredd.
"I'll bet you locked yourself in the bathroom when you were a kid, right?"
Fergie pressed his palms against the wall in a dozen places.
"See, it's an old-fashioned pressure lock. 50, 60 years ago, the Hushador. Big rage back then. Known in the trade as the burglar's delight. Nobody's been dumb enough to use one since."
Fergie pressed 3 fingers against the wall. Nothing. Moved a foot to the right. The third time he moved down a foot and a half, pressed against the cold concrete. A seam appeared, the width of a door. Fergie gave it a gentle shove. The slab of concrete hissed aside. "Very impressive," Hershey said. "Not bad," said Dredd.
"Thanks,"
Fergie said.
"I'm underwhelmed by your support."
The door slid shut behind him.
"Oh, and if anyone's interested, that thing hasn't been used in a hell of a long time. And who's ever coming in and out of this Janus deal has another way than this."
"Good," Dredd said. "Maybe they won't expect us."
"Drink to that, as soon as we find a bar."
"Scanner?" said Hershey. "That way," said Dredd. The passage went another 100 yards, twisting in every direction. Dredd noticed the absence of rats. He didn't need the scanner now. He could feel the deep tremor of power. The rats didn't like that at all.
"Air," Fergie sniffed. "Fresher than where we've been. Processed air."
Dredd nodded. The corridor took a sharp turn to the left. "Douse the light," he said. He moved past the corner. Hershey followed.
"We're close," she said softly. "I can feel the electricity in my hair. We'd better..." "Dredd!"
A blur of metal whipped around Hershey's waist, jerked her off her feet. The lawgiver fell from her hands. Dredd brought his Remington up to fire. The robot was faster. An automatic weapon chattered in its free hand, stitching a deadly path. Fergie stood frozen, staring wide-eyed at the monster overhead. "Down!" Dredd yelled. He was a millisecond late. Fergie cried out, grabbed his chest, spun around twice, and slammed into the concrete wall. Dredd bent low and stalked toward the big robot, blasting with the Remington, racking one shell into the chamber after the next. Knowing he wasn't even denting the metal warrior's hide, that he didn't dare fire at the brute's face or its steel and copper gut. He might put a hole in the son of a bitch's vital parts, but he might hit Hershey instead. A bullet plowed a shallow furrow through the flesh of Dredd's upper arm. The pain rocked him on his heels. Hershey screamed, kicking out against the robot's grip. The robot fired a volley at Dredd. Dredd felt flecks of stone slice his cheek. He rolled, came to his feet, held the Remington at his waist, and blasted at the narrow slit in the robot's metal joint. A blue electric flash, a wisp of black smoke. Dredd fired again, saw the bright sizzle, heard the high-pitched whine as steel tendons snapped. The robot shuddered. His brain said forward mode. One foot made it off the ground. The other didn't budge. The robot teetered, then hit the floor like a quake. Forward mode was still intact. The robot pounded its good foot against the ground, a jackhammer gone berserk. Hershey was still in the robot's grip. Dredd ran to her. He heard the sigh of air, turned, saw the door slide open behind him.
Rico. Rico and a woman. Both held weapons in their hands. He recognized the woman at once. Ilsa Hayden from Rico's trial. What was she doing here? That'll be enough, Rico said. Just put the weapon down.
No way. I shot this thing. I'm gonna eat it.
That's amusing, I'm sure.
Rico turned to the robot.
Fido, you clumsy bastard. If you don't mind functioning a while, break Judge Hershey's neck, please, on the count of 3. 1, 2...
Hershey, you all right?
Yeah. I'm all right, Dredd.
Dredd let the Remington fall from his hand. Rico laughed.
How human of you. Become a romantic, brother?
He motioned with his weapon.
Inside now. Fido, if the lady moves, crush her.
Ilsa walked past Dredd. When she bent to pick up Dredd's shotgun, she looked directly into Fergie's eyes.
Nice. Bit crude, but, nice. Watch her, Rico said. She's a real tease, Dredd.
Where's your boss? Dredd said. Let you out of your cage for the day? Rico shook his finger at Dredd.
If you're trying to get on my good side, won't do you any good, because I don't have one.
Where's Griffin?
Chief Justice Griffin is retired, so to speak. In his absence, I've assumed his responsibilities.
You mean you killed him? Rico looked pained.
Me? Of course not. He had an accident with Fido. Doggy's not entirely housebroken, I'm afraid.
Ilsa raised her weapon, closed one eye, and let the muzzle drop to the level of Dredd's chest.
Rico told you to move, honey. I think you should do what he says.
Dredd didn't answer. He walked toward the door where Rico and Ilsa had entered.
He looks like you,
Ilsa said.
He is a lot like me, naturally.
I'm nothing like you, Dredd said. Rico turned on him.
Wrong, brother. The only difference between us is that you destroyed your life to embrace the law. I destroyed the law to embrace life.
He swept out his palm, bowing slightly to Dredd.
After you, please. Step into the future, brother. This is how tomorrow looks. This is the way Rico's world is going to be.
Dredd stepped inside. 500,000 razor points of light burned in the darkness overhead. Dredd drew in a breath. 100 columns of luminescent brightness rose up from the floor. Glittering capsules, pods of azure blue, shimmering tubes of life. They stood erect in the clear blue fluid. Clones, mutants, beings unborn and already alive. Dredd stared at a watery face, sharp planes, rigid neck, dark hair drifting like seaweed above his head. It opened its silver eyes and looked back. Rico laughed.
This is the nursery, brother. Don't you recognize it? This is where you were born. Now don't look at him with such distaste, Joseph. That isn't just me in there. It's you.
Dredd felt the agony, the pain, and knew it wouldn't go away. Rico had guessed his thought, seen the revulsion, the horror there, and Dredd knew he was right. It was true. Looking at the clone was like looking in a mirror at himself. Rico walked away from Dredd, turned, the shimmering pods at his back.
Look at them, Joseph. Your brothers. In a few hours they'll be born. An endless supply of perfection. Now we have a choice. To create a race of robots like Fido out there, or a race of free-thinking people and call them humans. Why did you do it, Joseph? I thought about it all these years. Why? Why did you judge me?
I didn't have a choice. You killed innocent people.
Only as a means to an end, brother. You're forgetting that.
That's a lie you tell yourself. It was massacre. Murder. You can't call it anything else. You betrayed the law. Rico laughed.
I was your blood. Your brother. The only family you ever had. You sent me to my death and you talked to me about betrayal?
You are the traitor, brother, not me. Do you want to be the slave all your life? Do what you're told to do, Joseph? You have a choice now. Them or me.
You haven't given me a choice. I have to stop you, Rico. If you want to stop me, you'll have to kill me. Rico looked sad.
Well, I can certainly accommodate you, brother. But there's no hurry, is there? Fido.
Rico looked past Dredd through the great door of the Janus lab.
Bring Judge Hershey in here, then tear the bitch's arms and legs off.
Dredd didn't move. Don't do it, Rico.
Or you'll what, Joseph? Arrest me?
Rico's eyes blazed.
Take this one too, Fido. Crush them. Let's make some judge soup.
Rico. Ilsa stepped toward him.
Stay away from me. Do as I say, Ilsa.
Rico's voice scared the hell out of Ilsa. The giant robot clanged through the doorway, scraping its metal hide. It dragged its bad foot. One red eye looked off a good 20 degrees. Dredd saw Hershey in its grip. He tried to read her eyes.
Something. Not the way it ought to be. Take him, Rico said. Do it now.
The robot stopped, whirred. Its blunt head swiveled on its hydraulic neck. A heavy foot stomped against the floor. It turned, then dropped Hershey from its grasp, raised its hand, and slammed Rico in the chest. Rico cried out in surprise, staggered back, and fell. Ilsa ran to him. The robot moved in a blur, plucked her off the floor, and threw her to the ground. The robot turned on one heel. Fergie was hanging on the monster's metal back, his hands buried in an open slot. Dredd caught a glimpse of the controls, blinking lights, tangled coils of wire.
Dredd, over here!
Hershey tossed him the Remington. Dredd racked a shell in the chamber, turned and fired at Rico. Rico darted for cover, grabbed his lawgiver and squeezed off half a dozen shots at Dredd on the run. Then he disappeared into a maze of blue pods. Dredd saw the robot lurch, then run headlong into a solid wall. Fergie, what the hell are you doing?
I'm not doing anything,
Fergie cried out.
This damn thing wants to drive by itself.
The robot staggered, beat on the wall with its head. It stumbled, clattered dizzily across the room, reached up to slap the tormentor off its back.
No way, you tin-headed freak!
Fergie thrust his whole arm into the robot's back, jerked out a tangle of flashing wires. The robot went berserk. Its head turned completely around. Blue fire sparked from its eyes and ears, bashed itself against the wall, ripping Fergie loose. The robot took 2 jerky steps and toppled on its face. Smoke billowed from its chest.
Watch it, Dredd, Hershey called. The woman's off to the right, by the wall somewhere, and Rico's back there.
Dredd saw her and bent low near the tall accelerator. She nodded toward the forest of blue fluorescent pods. Hiding with your brothers. Yours, not mine. Dredd kept low. Fergie was on his back. You okay, Ferguson?
I don't think I'm too good.
Dredd looked at his face, at the blood soaking the front of his shirt. Ferguson was right. He wasn't too good at all.
You never got to say it, Dredd.
Never got to say what?
Hey, you know, man.
Yeah, I do. Dredd drew in a breath. I made a mistake. I'm sorry I misjudged you, Ferguson.
And you'll never arrest me again?
Okay, I'll never arrest you again. Fergie grinned.
Okay, man.
He closed his eyes. Dredd grabbed his shoulders. Ferguson, you talk to me, damn you! Dredd let him go. He clenched his fists, felt the fury begin deep in his belly, felt the fire race through his veins. Rico! He screamed out the name, grabbed the Remington, and ran toward the blue pods. Come out of there! Come out of there, Rico! He was driven by a rage he could scarcely contain, an anger that blinded him to caution and reason, a hatred that could only focus on Rico's face, Rico's laughter, Rico's silver eyes. He stalked through the eerie blue light, through the maze of glowing pods. Rico's spawn surrounded him, a company of ghosts, their coral lips open, their flesh unearthly white. Rico! Dredd squeezed off 2 shots. A crystal pod shattered. The clone blew apart in a blossom of pink and white. Rico, I'm coming for you. I'm coming! A hail of gunfire came at him from the dark.
Dredd turned, went to his knees, firing back in a wicked arc. Incubator shattered, spilling slippery flesh on the floor. One of Dredd's shots hit a tall accelerator, a black and silver column at the heart of the Janus lab. Lightning crackled along the tower, snaked to the top, then exploded in a blinding fireball, showering the pods with comets of molten steel. The incubators cracked. A flood of thick amniotic fluid hissed in the terrible heat. Dredd saw him then, as the computer burst into flame. Rico ran. Dredd fired, blowing a hole into the console, blinding 1,000 red eyes. The fire would keep Rico busy. A minute and a half. Dredd broke into the open, keeping low, heading straight for Rico's hiding place. Rico caught him there, raised up and raked his path with automatic fire. Dredd cursed and scrambled for cover, lead tearing the heel off his boot. Where the hell was Hershey? She had gone after Ilsa hours, no, only minutes ago. Time was playing tricks again. Another incubator exploded. Blue fire webbed the walls, sizzled the concrete floor. Dredd saw the flames beginning to burst from the equipment on the far side of the lab. Getting hot in here. Gonna get a hell of a lot worse. Rico laughed, a high-pitched, grating sound that set Dredd's nerves on edge.
Central, hatch the first set of clones, Rico shouted. On my command. Now!
Rico, don't do that.
The cloning process is not finished, Chief Justice Rico. The clones will be only 63% complete.
I don't care if they're pretty or not. I want the damn clones now!
Something exploded down below with the roar of a blast furnace, spewing a ball of yellow fire up through the floor. Place was going up. It couldn't last long. Hershey, where the hell are you? Hershey knew the woman was there, somewhere in this maze of piping, of bundled strands of cable and wire in the maintenance area in the back of the lab. Rico and Dredd were ripping the Janus lab apart. She could already feel the heat, see the flames licking at the pods. When the firestorm got back here, with umpteen zillion volts of power droning above her head, that combination, and pipes full of oxygen, nitrogen, and God knows what. Ilsa moved. Hershey heard her, came to her feet, then threw herself into the dark. Ilsa cried out, twisted herself, and swung a heavy wrench at Hershey's head. Hershey winced as the wrench caught her shoulder.
Judge, bitch. Keep away from me.
I wouldn't get near you on a bet, Hershey told her. But duty calls, friend.
Hershey feinted to the left, balled her fist, and hit Ilsa solidly in the belly. Ilsa gasped, stumbled, reached out and caught herself. She kicked out hard, a vicious blow with plenty of power behind it. Hershey felt something break, turned on her heels and saw the incubator coming. Crystal shattered, raining on her back in a rush of bilious fluid. The thing flopped out, slick as a fish, its head lying inches from Hershey's. Hershey felt the hairs creep up the back of her neck. The thing made a strangled noise in its throat, tried to pull itself erect on boneless flipper arms. It came at Hershey in its wet, bare muscle, pulsing veins clinging to bare bone. A bubble came out of its mouth. It sighed once, dropped with a sickening sound. Hershey got to her feet. Ilsa was gone. Black smoke was creeping across the floor. Hershey was sure she couldn't go back the way she'd come, and there was nothing but dead and smelly mutants up ahead. The flames licked at the heart of the pods. The smoke was too thick. He couldn't see Rico at all. The forest of incubators had turned into the center of hell. Fire shattered the crystal tubes. Mutants writhed and twisted in pain, caught in a terrible moment of horror between birth and fiery death. Dredd turned away. The image was etched forever in his mind. The manual made it clear. Daydreaming is spelled D-E-A-D. Dead. Rico hit him with a broken steel bar. The blow caught him just below the knee. Dredd went down. Rico raised his weapon for the final, killing blow. Dredd rolled, grabbed Rico and held on. Rico grunted, tore his way free and pounded Dredd in the face. Dredd felt his mouth fill with blood. Dredd kicked him in the crotch. Rico pushed Dredd away, backed off. Dredd was sure Rico had fractured his leg. He watched Rico scramble along the floor, grab his lawgiver. "Shit," Dredd said. Rico laughed, gave the weapon a loud command.
Grenade!
All lethal rounds exhausted. Select.
Standard fire!
All lethal rounds exhausted. Select.
Smoke bomb, damn you!
Dredd saw the muzzle flash, saw the round coming at him in a blur. It sizzled, then blossomed into a ball of liquid fire. Rico howled.
Central, turn off the overhead lighting, now!
The room went dark. Flames lit the curved walls of the room. Dredd struggled to his feet, fighting the heat that tried to gnaw through his chest. He turned on his back, gagged on the oily black smoke.
Central, he yelled. Turn on the damn lights.
Request denied. You are an escaped convict, Joseph Dredd. Surrender to authorities at once. Dredd swore, tore at his armor, finally ripped it free and tossed it across the room. Another pod exploded, sending mutant parts high into the air. Something fell close by. It had a half-size head. The head looked just like Dredd.
Central, look, I'll give myself up, okay? I'll surrender to Chief Justice Rico. Locate, please.
Chief Justice Rico has entered lift 990 through the A door to your right. Lift? What lift? It had to be the other way in, the real way to the Janus lab. The A door took him down a long and narrow corridor. It finally came to an end at a metal door, a glowing arrow pointing up. Dredd punched the button. The door slid back, shut again quickly, locking him in. The door slid open again. Dredd sucked in fresh air. Rain beat down upon his head. Soot ran down and stung his eyes. Rico stood just beyond him. His face was red with blood.
Waiting for you, brother. Thought you'd never come.
I'm here,
Dredd said. Rico shook his head. He aimed the lawgiver at Dredd's chest. Thunder rolled through the blackened skies. Dredd guessed they were 50, 60 stories high. The roof of Heavenly Haven, above the streets of Red Quad, where it had all begun.
This is how you repay me, brother? For telling you the truth? How can you go against me, Joseph? I'm the only person in the world, in your life, who never lied to you.
You broke the law. I did what I had to do.
Oh, no, brother.
Rico's terrible grin twisted his features.
No, we won't go through that business again. You will not limp away telling me about the law.
Rico closed his eyes, opened them again. Rain pelted off his face. He raised the lawgiver, let its muzzle rest on Dredd's head.
Joseph Dredd, do you stand ready to answer for your crimes?
Get on with it, Rico.
Dredd!
Rico shook his weapon in Dredd's face.
I hereby judge you, Dredd, to the charge of betraying your best friend. Guilty. To the charge of betraying your own flesh. Guilty. And finally, to the charge of being human when we could have been gods. Guilty.
Rico's eyes went wide.
The sentence is death!
Rico squeezed the trigger. Click. All lethal rounds exhausted. Select.
No!
Dredd let out a breath. Rico had forgotten. The madness had overwhelmed him, clouded his reason.
Damn you! Fire!
Rico's hand shook. He stared at the lawgiver as if the weapon, too, had betrayed him. All lethal rounds exhausted. Select.
Fire! Fire!
Dredd moved. His right hand struck out a short sweep to Rico's jaw. He forced the fingers of his left hand over the weapon's grip, clamping down on Rico's hand. Rico looked at him.
Joseph!
DNA accepted, the gun voice whirred. Select.
Signal flare,
said Dredd. Dredd fought against Rico's grip, wrenched the weapon up, away from them both. The night turned red. The flare singed Rico's face and rocketed into the night. Rico cried out, stumbling blindly away from Dredd. One foot found the edge of the roof, the other stepped into empty space. Rico flailed his arms, fell away. Dredd lunged for him, caught him by the wrist. Rico hung there, blinked up at Dredd with blind eyes.
You saved me, Joseph. Why did you do that?
The rain whipped down in a fury, the cold drops hard as stones.
I'll get you out of here. Hang on. You don't have to die, Rico.
Rico smiled.
All right, Joseph. I won't.
He brought his free hand up quickly, grabbed Dredd's wrist, and forced his hand free.
Life sentence, Joseph. Works fine for me.
Rico slid free.
No!
Dredd watched him turn slowly. His arms spread wide, watched him grow smaller, disappear in the dark veil of rain. His face was still there. His face. My face. He knew he was alone once more. Hollow. Nothing inside. Rico had taken it all away once. Now he had taken it again. Dredd was aware of the presence, the feeling of another person near. He looked up, saw Ilsa Hayden, the rain-soaked dress clinging to her slender form, the dark hair plastered against her cheeks. She held the Remington an inch from his head, showed him a gentle smile, drew her lips together, let them apart like a lover's tender kiss. Ilsa's head disappeared. A red mist hung in the air for a moment, and then swept away in the driving rain. Ilsa's body folded, slid to the edge of the roof, and followed Rico down. Dredd turned. Hershey stood in the lift, a lawgiver clutched in her hand. Behind her, Fergie sagged against the wall. His face was pale. Dredd looked at Hershey. He shook his head at Fergie. "You're alive," Dredd said simply.
What did you think I'd do? Die or something? Right when you and me were just getting to be good friends?
We are not friends, Ferguson. We know each other. Okay, we're acquaintances. I'll go as far as that.
Right. Close enough. How about that other stuff?
I said it once. Don't ask me again.
Honestly, Dredd, Hershey said.
All right. I'm dropping all charges. Do whatever you want. You're free.
Fergie laughed. Laughing hurt, but what the hell?
I knew that,
he said.
What are friends for?
They were waiting in the street. Hundreds of them. Street judges, cadets, judge hunters. The street was jammed with lawmasters, blue, white, and green lights flashing into the night. The storm had moved off to the south. Dredd walked out of the doorway and into the street. Hershey stood beside him. Fergie held up between them. Medics hurried over, easing him gently to a stretcher. An okay smile, Dredd thought. The guy was maybe all right. Maybe just... He caught himself. Tried to think about anything else. The two judge hunters walked toward him, stiff, proud, their faces devoid of any emotion at all. Dredd drew in a breath. Easy, Hershey said. The two hunters parted. A third man stepped between them. He was taller than the other two, a dark-haired man in his 40s. Dredd recognized him at once. He wore the white braid of Chief Judge Hunter across his chest. The man stopped in front of Dredd. "I'm Judge Lackard." He nodded curtly at Hershey. "You're Joseph Dredd."
"Yes, sir. Am I under arrest or what?"
Lackard looked at him a long moment. "That won't be necessary. Central has broadcast the Janus plans in the clear. After Griffin's death, everyone knows what happened in there. We owe you a debt of gratitude, Judge Dredd." Not Joseph Dredd this time. Judge Dredd. Dredd looked out at the crowd, the men and women he respected, the law, the only life he knew. "We have to reorganize the council," Lackard said. "We'd like you to consider the position of Chief Justice."
"Thank you. I'm honored."
Dredd nodded to his right.
"I recommend Judge Hershey, sir."
The judge hunter nodded. "Would you consider it, Judge Hershey?" Hershey looked astonished. Are you sure?"
"Don't be dumb, Hershey," Dredd said. "It's a good career move."
Let me think about it, sir," Hershey said.
Dredd looked pained. "Don't think, Hershey. Do it. Haven't I taught you anything?"
Dredd turned and walked away. He spotted a lawmaster standing ready and headed for it. Hershey followed him, stepped in his path. "So that's it, huh?" A near-death experience and no goodbye?
Hershey.
What?
Goodbye.
Hershey grinned. You are hopeless, Dredd. Totally hopeless. She touched the back of his neck, drew him close, and kissed him full on the mouth before he could pull away.
That's a code 212, Dredd said. Illegal physical contact with a judge.
No, that's a 137. You impersonating a groon, Dredd. You're human. You don't have to fake it, friend.
Dredd threw his leg over the saddle of the lawmaster. He looked at Hershey and grinned. Typical behavior, Hershey. I knew you'd say that.
Yeah? You think you know everything, Dredd. You don't. There's a hell of a lot of stuff you don't know. Dredd thought about it. Decided maybe she was right.
He gripped the control bar of the lawmaster, let the engine whine up to a roar, a thunder of raw power that trembled off the walls of Red Quad and drowned every sound in Dredd's world. In Judge Hershey's second year as Chief Justice, the Lady Liberty, or Statue of Liberty as it was known in the way back when, was ordered completely restored and placed in a prominent position in the plaza across from the Hall of Justice. While the council felt the statue did not entirely reflect Megacity's current standards of justice, it was the majority opinion, under the leadership of Chief Justice Hershey, that the presence of the Lady Liberty underscored the need for reforms in several areas of criminal and civil law. History of the Megacities, James Ohlmeyer III, Chapter 41, The Hershey Years, 2191.